Hi, this is a very interesting book, and I'd like to introduce it to everyone who are interested in UFO, ET, and extraterrestrial life from space. Amy, Child from the Stars. Chapter 1. First Encounter. It all started one summer afternoon in a small, quiet town on the beach where my grandma and I go on holiday almost every year. We always stay in a little wooden house with several pine trees and many shrubs in the backyard and a front yard full of flowers. The house was on the outskirts of town near the ocean, on a path that led towards the beach. My grandma likes to take her vacation at the end of summer, where there aren't so many people. She says it's quieter and cheaper then. It was beginning to get dark. I was alone, standing on high rocks near the isolated beach, just watching the ocean. Suddenly I saw a red light in the sky above me. It came down, changing colors and giving off sparks. I thought that it was a giant sparkler or some kind of firework, but as it descended and grew larger, I could see it wasn't, for it began to look like a small aeroplane or something even bigger. Without making a sound, it fell into the ocean about 150 feet from the beach right in front of me. In spite of how odd it all was, I thought that I'd witnessed an air disaster and looked up at the sky to see if anybody had parachuted out of the plane. No one had. Nothing disturbed the silence and tranquility of the beach. I waited a little longer to see if I could make out anything more, but I couldn't. Then I thought it must have been a meteorite, whatever it was. There seemed to be a strange sensation in the air. As I started to leave, something white moved, floating in the ocean at the point where the object had fallen. Someone was swimming towards the rocks, which convinced me that it must have been a plane crash. I was really nervous. A survivor of the disaster was coming closer, and I didn't know what to do. I looked to see if there was anybody else around, but there wasn't. I didn't know where to stay there or try to climb down the rocks to the water to help whoever it was. But the rocks were too high. It would take me ages to get down, and in the meanwhile, that person seemed to be perfectly all right because he was swimming so fast and so well. As he approached, I realized that in spite of his white hair, he was a young boy. He swam to the rocks, and before climbing out of the water, he looked at me with a friendly smile. I thought that he might be relieved that he hadn't drowned. He certainly didn't seem to be upset about the situation, and it calmed me down a little. When he had climbed to the top of the rocks in front of me, he shook the water out of his hair, gave me a happy wink, as if we shared a secret. Then I definitely felt better. After coming over to sit down near me on a protruding rock, he just sighed, started gazing at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the sky, as though nothing special had happened. He was younger and shorter than I was. I thought he was disguised because apart from the color of his hair, he wore a white suit like one for diving, which fitted close to his body, made of some waterproof material because now it wasn't even wet. It ended in a pair of white boots with thick soles. I should have realized that it's impossible to swim so well wearing boots like those, but I didn't. On his chest was a gold-colored emblem of a heart with wings. It occurred to me that this might not have been a diving suit, but some kind of uniform of a sports club for young people who are interested in airplanes. Some instruments that looked like portable radios or mobile phones hung from each side of his belt, which was the same gold color. In the center of the belt was a very striking, large, shiny buckle. It occurred to me that I'd like to have a belt as ornate as that one, but I wasn't sure if I would dare to wear it on the street. It would be great for a fancy dress party, though, or a carnival, or for belonging to a club like KISS. We spent a few moments in silence, sitting next to each other. Since he wasn't saying anything, I asked him what had happened. "Forced landing," he answered, smiling. He was nice. He had a strange accent and big, friendly eyes. Since he was only a boy, I thought that the pilot must have been a grown-up. "What about the pilot?" I asked him, looking at the sea. "Here he is, sitting next to you." Wow, that surprised me. This kid was something. At less than my age, he was already flying aeroplanes. But then I thought to myself that, given the accident, he hadn't done it so well. As he seemed not to be worried about it, I imagined that his parents must be very rich. "Somebody else traveling with you?" "No, thank goodness." He smiled and said nothing. Night was falling and I was getting cold. He noticed this because he asked, "Are you cold?" "Yes, a little." "The temperature is just right," he told me, smiling. Immediately, I felt that I wasn't cold at all, and I didn't have a clue how that had happened. After a little while, I asked him what he was going to do. "Fulfill the mission," he replied without taking his eyes off the sky. I thought that he must be an important kid, not just an ordinary schoolboy on holiday like me. He had an aeroplane, a uniform, a mission, and maybe a secret one. On the other hand, he was just a kid. Yet I didn't dare asking him about his club or mission. He made me feel something like respect or fear, in spite how small he was. He was different, too silent. I wondered if he was groggy because of this accident. "What's going to happen now that the plane is wrecked?" "What? But it's not wrecked," he replied merrily, leaving me even more confused. "Wasn't it lost? Wasn't it completely destroyed?" "No." "Is it possible to take it out of the water?" I asked. "Oh yes, of course it can be taken out of the water." He was observing me affectionately and added, "What's your name?" "Peter," I said, but something was beginning to bother me. Besides having his head in the clouds, he didn't answer my question directly, and he kept changing the subject. He was acting all mysterious, making out he was older than me, and I didn't like that much. He noticed this was bothering me and obviously thought it was funny. "Relax, Peter. Calm down. How old are you?" 13? Well, almost. What about you?" He laughed softly. His laugh reminded me of a baby being tickled. I thought he was going to gloat because he could fly a plane and I couldn't, which I didn't like, but actually he was rather nice. I couldn't get really mad at him. "I'm older than you think," he remarked to me with a smile. Reaching for his belt, he pulled off one of the instruments. It was some kind of calculator. He turned it on and glowing symbols appeared that I had never seen before. He made some calculations and, seeing the results, he began to laugh and even harder and said, No, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me." Night had come and a beautiful full moon appeared, illuminating the ocean and entire beach. He kept looking at the scenery, the sky, the stars, and the moon, silently, as if I wasn't there. Then I started thinking how this kid wasn't from around here, that he must be from some distant place, who knows where. At the same time, I was feeling more and more unhappy with this strange kid's silence and riddles. I examined his face carefully. He couldn't be more than 11 years old, yet he had hinted that he was much older, and also that he was an aeroplane pilot. Could he be a dwarf? "Some people believe in extraterrestrials," he remarked almost distractedly. I thought for a long time before opening my mouth. He was watching me, his eyes full of curiosity and light. The night stars seemed to be reflected in his pupils. He looked too joyful to be a normal kid. I remembered his burning aeroplane falling into the ocean and how, according to him, it wasn't wrecked. There was something very strange about that. It was weird, too, how he'd appear right in front of me. His calculator with funny symbols was strange as well. So were his accent, his hair, his clothing. Besides, to be honest, kids just don't fly aeroplanes. Are you an extraterrestrial? I asked him, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. If I were, would that scare you? Right there and then, I knew for sure that he had come from another world. I was a little frightened, although he seemed to be looking at me with kindness. Are you a baddie? I asked timidly. He laughed and amused. Maybe you're more an imp than I am. His remark made me feel very surprised. I was a boy who always behaved well. I was a good student and never got in trouble. Why do you say that? Because you're an earthling. I got the message. He was saying that the earthlings aren't much good. This bothered me, but I decided to ignore his comments for the moment and proceed cautiously with this alien who seemed to think that he was superior to us human beings. But could it be true that I was talking to someone from another world? I just couldn't believe it. Are you really an extraterrestrial? Don't panic, he comforted me, smiling and joking and pointed to the stars. This universe is full of life. Millions of worlds are inhabited. There are lots of good people up there. His words had a strange effect on me. When he said that, I could almost see those millions of worlds inhabited by good people. I wasn't afraid anymore. I decided not to be surprised by the fact that he was a being from another planet and just to accept it, especially since he seemed friendly and harmless. But all the same, it did bother me that he had offended my species. Why do you say that we earthlings are bad? I asked. He kept looking overhead. How nice the sky looks from Earth. This atmosphere gives it a brilliance, a color. I started feeling annoyed again. Once again, he wasn't answering my questions. Besides, I don't like people thinking that I'm bad when I'm not. Just the opposite, in fact. I had already decided I was going to be a hunter when I grew up. Not hunting animals, the poor things, but hunting down bad people, hunters included. I planned to bury them in a big hole and shovel earth on top of them, and that way, rid Earth of evil. There, in the Pleiades, is a civilization so advanced that, no, you wouldn't believe me. We aren't all bad here. Look at that star. We're seeing it as it was 1,000,000 years ago. How it doesn't exist anymore. A civilization from that region colonized the Zeta Reticulus cordon, and now they live in... Like I said before, we aren't all bad here. Why did you say that we're all bad, huh? I didn't say that, he answered, still looking at the sky. His eyes were sparkling. It's a miracle, he remarked. Yes, you did say that. By raising my voice, I was joyfully going to shake him out of his daydream. He was acting just like the teenage girl who lived next door, sitting gulping at her favorite pop star on TV. He now looked at me attentively, but he didn't seem mad at me. I meant to say that, compared with other worlds, in this one there's not much goodness or solidarity. You see? You're saying that we're a muck. That's not what I meant either, Peter. He started laughing again and tried to pat me on the head. I liked that even less. I pulled away. It bothers me when people treat me like I'm just a kid, and a stupid one too. After all, I'm one of the best students in my class. I even won a junior chess tournament, and my name appeared in a newspaper. In the section sports in our schools, in the subsection chess, in the subsection junior. Besides, I was almost 13 years old. If this planet is so bad, then what are you doing here? Have you noticed how the moon is reflected in the ocean? He kept ignoring me and changing the subject. Did you come here just to tell me to pay attention to the moon's reflection? Maybe. Have you noticed that we're floating in a universe? When he said that, I finally snapped with annoyance. I forgot any evidence to the contrary and decided this kid must be crazy. Of course, he thought he was an extraterrestrial, and that was why he was making such absurd statements. Or else he was a rich brat who happened to be nuts, out to trick everyone in this fantastic story. With that suit he probably paid a fortune for. Maybe there was no aeroplane at all. Maybe he was in the water all the time, and from there he set off some kind of sparkler which had confused me for some other tomfoolery. I wanted to go home. I felt stupid because for a few minutes I had been taken in by his fantastic stories, or maybe he'd been pulling my leg just to laugh at me. An extraterrestrial indeed, and I had believed him. I felt ashamed, mad at him, and at myself. I felt like giving him a good sock on the nose. You think my nose is really ugly? That stopped me in my tracks. I felt afraid. Was he reading my mind? I looked at him. He seemed to be laughing, even jeering at me, which I didn't take kindly to. I wanted to think it had just been a coincidence between that he said and what I was thinking. But what if it wasn't chance? Maybe he really wasn't a being from another world after all, an alien who could read minds, or was I standing in front of a madman? I had better try to check it out. A really great idea came into my mind. Guess what I'm thinking now, I said, and I began to picture a birthday cake. So, shall I read your mind? He asked. Forget it, I was just joking. He found my clumsy evasion rather funny. Haven't you had enough proof already? I wasn't going to give an inch. If he didn't mention the birthday cake, there was nothing doing. Proof? What proof? Proof of what? He stretched his legs and supported his elbows on a rock. Look, Peter, there are other realities. There are other beings from more subtle worlds, with more subtle intelligence and subtle ways of communication. And what on earth does a subtle mean? I asked him, playing for the time. How many candles? He asked and smiling. I felt as though somebody had hit me in the stomach. It made me want to cry. I felt dull and stupid. When I had recovered, I asked him to forgive me for having doubted him, but evidently it hadn't bothered him, for he paid no attention to me and began to laugh. I decided not to doubt him again. End of chapter 1. See you in the next video. Let me know if you like it. Amy, Child of a Star, Chapter 2. Flying with Peter. I must go. It's getting late, I said. Come back with me. My grandma would be happy to meet a boy from another world. Let's not involve adults in our friendship just now, he said, smiling and wrinkling his nose. But I have to go. Your good and nice grandma is sleeping soundly. She's not going to miss you if we talk for a while. Once again he surprised me and found myself admiring him. How did he know that my grandma was sleeping? Then I remembered that he was an extraterrestrial being and that he could read minds, and who knows what else he could do. That's not all, Peter, he said, sensing what I was thinking. From my ship, I could see that she was just about to fall asleep. Then he exclaimed enthusiastically, Let's take a walk along the beach. He jumped to his feet, ran to the edge of a very high rock, and jumped off. I thought he must surely have killed himself. Frantically, I ran over to look down into the abyss. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was descending slowly, gliding like a seagull, his arms extended in the air. Then I remembered that I shouldn't be too surprised at anything done by this amazing and joyful boy from the stars. So I carefully got down from the rock as best I could and joined him on the beach. "How do you do that?" "By being like a bird," he responded and began to run happily along the surf. I thought that I would like to do it too, but I couldn't feel how to do it. "Yes, you can." Once more, he had read my mind. He came over and encouraged me and called out happily, "Let's run and jump like birds." He took me by the hand. I felt a surge of energy pass into my arms and spread into all of my body. We began running along the beach. "Now, let's jump." He was able to jump much higher than I could and pulled me up after him. He seemed to hang suspended in the air for a few moments before his feet hit the sand again. We continued running, and every now and then we jumped. "We're birds! We're birds!" he cried, encouraging me and making me feel so good. Little by little, I stopped thinking into my usual way. I could feel I was changing. I wasn't everyday self anymore. Encouraged by the boy in white, I was imagining myself as light as a feather, little by little, believing in the idea of being a bird. "Now up!" Incredibly, I could tell that we were beginning to stay in the air for a few seconds. Gently, we descended and continued running, only to rise up in the air again. Each time we were doing it better. It was really amazing. "Don't be surprised, you can do it now." Each time we tried, it got easier. In the light of the moon and the stars, we ran and jumped along the edge of the waves like a slow-motion scene in a movie. I felt like another life, another world. "Just enjoy flying," he encouraged me. A little later, he let go of my hand. "And you can do it alone. Yes, you can," he exhorted as he ran beside me. "Now!" Slowly, we lifted up, no longer touching each other, floating in the air for a few seconds, then beginning to sink down very gently with our arms extended, as if we were gliding. "It's marvelous." "Bravo, bravo!" he congratulated me. I don't know how long we played that night, but for me, it was like a wonderful dream. When I felt tired, I threw myself on the sand, breathing hard and laughing happily. It had been a fabulous, unforgettable experience. I didn't say anything out loud, but inside my head I was thanking my strange little friend for having enabled me to do things that I'd always thought impossible. I didn't know just how many surprises that spectacular night had in store for me. The lights of a big beach resort sparkled on the other side of the bay. Delightedly, my friend contemplated the shifting reflections of the dark water. He was happy, stretched out in the sand, bathed in bright moonlight. Looking at the full moon, he laughed. "How wonderful! It doesn't fall. This planet of yours is really fantastic." I had never thought about it, but now that he was saying this, yes, I thought it was beautiful to have stars, the ocean, the beach, the lovely moon suspended there, and what's more, it wasn't falling. "Is your planet beautiful?" I asked. He sighed deeply while looking at a point in the sky to our right. "Oh yes, it's beautiful. But all of us know that, and we take good care of it." I remembered that he had more or less said that we Earthlings are not much good. I now understood why. That we don't value our planet or preserve it, why they take care of theirs. "What's your name?" He thought my question was funny. "It wouldn't make sense if I told you." "Why? Is it a secret?" "Honestly, it's just that the sound of my name doesn't exist in your language, so you won't be able to pronounce it." "You speak a different language? How did you learn to speak my language then? I don't speak it or even understand it, unless I have this, he replied, taking an instrument from his belt. This is an interpreter. It explores your brain at the speed of light and transmits what you think and what you want to say to me. That's how I understand you. When I'm going to say something, it translates what I want to say, and it makes me move my lips and tongue just like you would do. Well, almost like you. Nothing is perfect. He put away the interpreter and began to contemplate the sea, pulling his knees up to his chest as he sat on the sand. So, that's how you know what I'm thinking. I thought you were doing telepathy. Well, no. But I'm also making progress with practicing pure telepathy without the interpreter. What should I call you then? Well, I don't think you'll be able to pronounce my name, Amy Shimshma, which in my language means friend, because that's what I am. I'm a friend of everyone. Ha ha! I laughed out loud when I heard those strange sounds. You're right, I can't. But since your name starts with Amy, I'll just call you Amy. It's shorter and it sounds like a name. Do you like it? He looked at me happily and then exclaimed, That's a perfect name, Peter, giving me a hug. At that moment, I felt that I had formed a new, very special friendship, and so it proved to be. What's the name of your planets? Oh dear, the same problem. There are no equivalent sounds. But it's up there, and smiling, he pointed towards the stars. While Amy was observing the sky, I started thinking about all the Space Invaders films that I'd seen on the movies on the internet. When are you going to invade us? I asked him. He thought my question was funny. Why do you think that we're going to invade Earth? I don't know, but in the movies, the extraterrestrials always try to invade us. Are you one of those? This time he laughed so merrily that it was infectious, and I started laughing too. I felt ridiculous because of my distrust. Then I tried to justify what I had said. It's just that on TV. Of course, Earthling television. Let's see one of those Space Invader films, he exclaimed, pulling another instrument from his belt buckle. He pressed the button and the screen lit up. It was a small color television with amazingly sharp, clear picture. Amy changed channels rapidly. What was surprising was that even though there weren't many stations around where we were staying, masses of them now appeared on the screen. Movies like live programs, news shows, commercials. The shows were in all different languages spoken by people from all over the world. How could he get so many stations without subscribing to a cable company? The films about Space Invaders are really ridiculous, said Amy, amused. How many channels can you get there? All of them that are transmitting at this moment on your planet. All of them? All of them. In the world. In the world, naturally. This instrument receives signals picked up by our own, let's say, satellites, which are invisible to you people, of course. Here's one from Australia. Look. On the screen appeared some creatures with octopus heads and multiple bulging eyes crisscrossed with little red veins. They fired green rays at the crowd of terrified human beings. My friends seemed to be having a good time watching this film. What a laugh! Don't you think it's very funny, Peter? No? Why? Because these monsters exist only in the monstrous imagination of people who make these films. I thought this over, but still I wasn't convinced. I had spent my whole life seeing all kinds of scary, evil space invaders on screen, and the idea couldn't be wiped out in one fell swoop. But if here on Earth there are iguanas, crocodiles, octopuses, sharks, why couldn't really evil and ugly creatures exist in other worlds? Amy smiled and said, Please, Peter, take notice that Evil is one thing and ugly is another. Not all that you consider ugly is evil, any more than everything you consider beauty is really good. But I can guarantee that up there aren't intelligent beings, whether ugly or beautiful by your standards, the least bit interested in doing harm to your world. Furthermore, those who are able to get there because of their high scientific advancement only want the best for your world. I didn't believe what he said. It was his opinion against hundreds of films that I had seen before. Do you know the whole universe, Amy? The whole universe? Of course not. Then maybe there are some worlds you don't know about, where evil, intelligent beings live? Amy was laughing his head off. Evil, intelligent beings. That's like saying bad, good people, or skinny, fat people, or ugly, pretty people. Those are opposite things, Peter. I couldn't understand this. What about the crazy, evil scientists who invent weapons of mass destruction, the ones that all the cartoon superheroes on TV fight against? Amy could read my mind and explained. They're not intelligent. They're crazy. Besides, these are only fantasies. Films, cartoons, nothing more. Well then, it's possible for the world to exist that's full of crazy scientists who could destroy us. Other than those already on Earth? Impossible. Why? Because crazy people destroy their own civilization before reaching the necessary scientific level to leave their own planet and invade other worlds. And you should definitely make a note of that. Do you want me to repeat it? No. Well then, just never forget that crazy people destroy their own civilizations before reaching the necessary scientific level to leave their own planets and invade other worlds. Okay, stop there. Don't keep going on about it. And those who reached the necessary high level only got there because they had already left their madness behind. Consequently, they don't want to harm anybody, because only mad people want to harm those who no harm do to them. Real intelligence goes along with goodness, or it isn't real intelligence. So, those who are able to visit Earth are not the big mad wolf you think, Peter. Amy seemed to be painting a whole new universe for me, one colored pink, and I didn't completely believe him. I still thought it was possible that some planets could exist that were inhabited by crazy people who weren't all that crazy. I mean, beings that are intelligent, cold, scientific, efficient, and at the same time cruel and evil. Amy knew, of course, that I was thinking, and as usual, was finding it very amusing. So now, it's become a matter of crazy clever people. You're really funny, Peter. And where are those crazy people? So crazy, so intelligent, so cold, and so ugly, and so evil? How come they're never invaded and destroyed any earthly civilizations? He asked me, putting on an innocent look. I thought for a while before answering, but couldn't find any examples of extraterrestrial evil in our history. Well, I don't know. Cosmic paranoia, he said and started laughing. I thought he could be right, but how could he be absolutely certain of the innocence of all the inhabitants of outer space? There were probably good ones, like Amy, and bad ones too, just like on Earth. Amy tried to reassure me. Believe me, Peter, in the universe there are filters which prevent the undesirables ever entering into higher levels of existence. Otherwise, terrible disaster could occur in the universe. Don't you think so? Well, sure. Sometimes I didn't understand him very well. Some people say as above, so below, which would suggest that if there are evil here, it's up there too. But up there is not entirely the same as down here. Just as a respectable neighborhood is not the same as a city, slum, full of delinquents. When the civilizations of the universe reach a certain level of development, there are no more horrors, no more delinquents, and people only work for the good. Remember, it's much easier to develop the technology necessary to build bombs than it is to build intergalactic spaceships. If a civilization hasn't developed solidarity, wisdom, or kindness while developing a high level of scientific knowledge, it will end up using that knowledge against itself. That happens long before a civilization could travel to another world. The universe doesn't commit suicide. It doesn't permit anything to last very long that goes against the highest purpose of the universe, of life itself. But couldn't some bad guys survive in such a planet by chance? By chance? Nothing happens by chance, Peter. The universe is the reflection of a perfect, superior order. Everything has a well-defined cause and precise purpose. There are mathematical laws that apply in all domains, even in the evolution of the civilization of the universe. But I can assure you, all planetary civilizations that are ignorant of the need for universal solidarity go on to self-destruct if they reach a high technological level and don't overcome this lack of understanding. In other words, when the scientific level of a world exceeds its level of solidarity by too much, that world would destroy itself. Level of solidarity? I could easily understand what a planet's scientific level might be, but the idea of level of solidarity was hard for me to grasp. This solidarity I'm speaking of, Peter, has its roots in love. We can say that solidarity is made of love, affection, and kindness. When human beings share love, affection, and kindness, they radiate a certain kind of energy, a very fine energy, the highest, in fact. It can be measured by instruments like those we have. Really? Sure, because love is a force, a vibration that penetrates the whole universe. It is what enables the universe to exist, as you will soon see. We could say that love is the vitamin that all forms of life need, and the more advanced the evolution is, the more they need it. How's that? A dog or a dolphin needs more affection than worms or bacteria. Oh, sure. And a human being even more. It's true. As soon as I got the point, I didn't feel as bad as before about my fear of... I almost feel ashamed to confess it. Well, this is a secret. Shh. Of nobody loving me. But now I understood that needing more affection is not a sign of weakness, but about us human beings a long way off from worms and bacteria. Cool. That's it, Peter. And from wild beasts too. Okay, Amy, thanks for the lesson. You're welcome. And whole civilizations too. They need solidarity, the energy of love, affection, kindness, just the same. If a world's level of solidarity is low, there is unhappiness, hate, violence, division, and war. If, at the same time, there is a high level of capacity for distraction, do you understand what could happen, Peter? Sure, a big disaster could occur. Is that what you are trying to tell me? I have lots of things to tell you, but let's go slowly. Let's continue talking about your doubts. I still couldn't believe that there weren't any crazy people or invader monsters in outer space, which infinitely big as it is. I told him about a film I'd seen about lizard extraterrestrials that dominated many planets because they were very well organized. Amy replied, "No civilization could survive for long without solidarity. To attain the technology that enables one to arrive at another world in a matter of minutes, far greater scientific development could be needed than what you have here on this planet. It would take a long time to reach that, And to survive for so long, you will have to evolve a world of benevolence and affection, with equal opportunity and fairness for all. Otherwise, you will end up destroying your whole world through the misuse of science and technology. Unfortunately, you are already doing it. In case you don't realize, it's happening every day, faster and faster. You're right. We're giving our poor planet a real beating. It's because of lack of solidarity, Peter. All the ills of this world are due to nothing more than the lack of that vitamin. There isn't any organization without solidarity which can last for very long. So, draw your own conclusions about the future of this planet if everything continues the way it's going now. Later, Amy would explain more of this to me, but for the moment I did still hang on to my doubts about the clever and evil monsters disguised like peaceful beings, nice just on the surface. Mr. Paranoia watches too much TV, Amy exclaimed and then added, Try to elevate your thoughts, Peter. When we're thinking of horrendous possibilities, we don't raise our sights to appreciate the higher reality, where we could find goodness, beauty, and truth. Those treasures have been always there, waiting for us to find them with our eyes so that they can reveal themselves. Sometimes you talk like a poet, Amy, and it's hard for me to understand you. Do other bad people exist in the universe other than those on Earth? Well, in the first place, we don't divide people into good and bad. Some are more advanced, some less, that's all. Alright then, do beings who have advanced as little as us here exist anywhere else? Of course, and many who are much less advanced as well. Worlds exist where you couldn't survive for half an hour. 1,000,000 years ago, there was a real inferno right here on Earth. Well, maybe for the beings who lived here then, but it would be an inferno for us. And yes, there are worlds inhabited by real monsters. You see? I exclaimed triumphantly. I was right. You just admitted it yourself. Those were the monsters I was talking about. But don't worry, they inhabit worlds much more backwards than this one. Their minds are too primitive to enable them even to discover the will. They'll never arrive here at this rate, not before they cease to be dangerous, or else they'll become extinct first, victims of their own medicine. That was comforting to hear. Then, we Earthlings aren't the worst inhabitants of the universe after all. No, but you're among the most paranoid in the galaxy. We laughed like old friends. End of chapter 2. Until the next video.